As we know, protests following the murder of George Floyd popped up across the nation in 2020, and there were countless dangerous encounters with police. And in New York City, city officials are paying over $13 million in a class action lawsuit over police tactics. As an attorney on the case, can you give us a little bit of background on that suit and what are the results of that?
Sure. Obviously, that summer was during the COVID pandemic, but within days of the murder of George Floyd by Derek Chauvin, people across the country took to the streets to highlight police violence that had been occurring for decades against Black and brown people in this country. In New York City, many of these protesters who were protesting police violence were met with police violence. In the months following the protest, multiple reports were issued condemning the police response and identifying lack of preparedness by the NYPD to handle protests, including reports by the New York City Department of Investigation, the New York City Law Department, and the New York Attorney General's office. And soon thereafter, the New York State Attorney General, Letitia James, actually filed a lawsuit against the city of New York over their protest policing. The Legal Aid Society and New York Civil Liberties Union joined together. They also filed a lawsuit over the same type of conduct with different clients. Those cases were consolidated for discovery. And as a civil rights lawyer, we were a little concerned that activists needed to be in the room. Activists needed to be part of that litigation themselves. And so I joined in with some of my colleagues, including Dave Rankin and John Moore of Beldock, Levine and Hoffman, Elena Cohen, Remy Green, and Jessica Massimi of Cohen and Green, and Gideon Orion Oliver. And we joined together and filed our own lawsuit, this class action. It was consolidated with other lawsuits brought by firms like Rob Rickner's firm and Josh Moskowitz and Ali Frick and Doug Lieb and others. And we worked together on discovery. And the discovery in this case was tremendous. Thousands of hours of video. And that's for body-worn camera, Argus video, aviation video, tarot video, cell phone video, tens of thousands of pages of documents, dozens and dozens of CCRB investigations and Internal Affairs Bureau reports, thousands of pages of emails and text communications, hundreds of depositions. And the really amazing thing was that this team of lawyers, consolidated across 7 or 8 different cases, began to work cohesively and effectively. So ordinarily, the phrase is, you can't fight City Hall. But with this team of lawyers with different skill sets, this consolidated set of cases was able to not only fight City Hall, but began to overwhelm the New York City Law Department. And that's when they started to pick a few cases here and there to settle. And they settled the Mott Haven case, and that was the one that Sarah and Wood cases, and that class action settled for 230 or so individuals. And then they came to our case, to the So case, and they settled our case for over 1,380 individuals arrested across about 8 or 9 different days at 18 different locations during the summer of 2020.
You've spoken about the growing cost to taxpayers when it comes to this. How is this a red flag for city leaders?
I mean, I think that that's a very interesting question. It's something that I've been saying, for a while. I've been litigating cases against the NYPD for more than 20 years. And the history of these litigations seems to be for the NYPD and their lawyers to deny, eventually make a payment, the city taxpayer funds it, and then they make no changes to how things happen, to what caused these cases. And this happens during every big protest in New York City. It happens during most small protests in New York City. And there seems to be virtually no, what I call, institutional knowledge carried over from case to case to case, where you would think they would eventually get to a point and understand, wow, we've got a problem. And so that hasn't happened. And so far, the NYPD had refused to really make substantive changes that would effectuate the change in allowing for constitutionally compliant protest policing in New York City. So if I'm a leader of the city, if I'm a municipal leader, and I see millions of dollars paid in 2003 for anti-war protests, in 2004, the Republican National Convention, in 2011 for Occupy Wall Street, and I see nothing's happened, obviously I can't be surprised in 2020 when there's a $13 million payment for Black Lives Matter Summer 2020 protest. But at some point, it should be a flag saying, do something about this. This is
right,
just
like, hello.
And again.
Yeah. Well, I have to. Do you think that the NYPD is going to make reforms and changes now that this has happened, and that possible other things could happen in the future?
There's 2 different types of relief you can get sometimes in lawsuits, right? You can get what's called monetary relief, which is what we're getting for these 1,380 people. You can also get injunctive relief, right? And that's the type of relief where you say you can no longer do this thing, or you have to stop doing this thing. That's the injunctive relief. And so that's something that the consolidated lawsuits, there were about 8 or 9 consolidated lawsuits. There's still about 4 or 5 ongoing. And I hope that those 4 or 5 are going to bring about that injunctive relief that's going to bring about the change, the reform. But I also think that big change doesn't happen just from people taking the streets, or just from lawyers going to court, or just from leaders making laws and statutes. It only happens when those 3 things converge together in a moment's time. And that's when big change can happen. And that's what I'm hoping is going to occur right now.
And what do you think, for our viewers to know, like, what do you think the significance of a legal victory like this is when we talk about the rights of protesters and demonstrations?
For the protesters who are out in the street, I think this is justice. This is how you get justice in this country when you're a protester and your rights are violated. The justice you get isn't a verbal apology. It isn't the police getting fired or arrested. The justice is a resolution of your civil rights claims. And so this lawsuit is bringing justice to 1,380 individuals. I also think it sends a message a little wider than that to all the protesters, to all the people who want to take to the streets, that when there's a problem, when their rights are being violated, when they're involved in expressive speech activity, they know there are lawyers out here who will have their backs, who will sit there and say, you may have been violated, your rights may have been violated today, but we will do something about it, and we will have your back, and we will get you justice. And I think that's something that this lawsuit should permeate throughout the country, to understand there are lawyers like myself all over this country, ready to help and support people who are out there doing the right thing.
And also, too, do you think, other areas in the United States will see what has happened with this case and be like, you know what? Maybe there'll be some other civil rights lawyers be like, you know what, I'm going to do this or fight for this same thing in my area.
Historically, there have been other protest class actions, but they take place when there's been a huge amount of unlawful mass arrests and misconduct. We saw that in Chicago a bunch of years ago in a case that was called Vodak versus City of Chicago, and that was brought by the People's Law Firm. I know in D.C. there are a number of class action protest cases litigated by Mara and Carl at the Partnership for Civil Justice. I know Carol Sobel and others out in California and Los Angeles litigate class actions around protests. So it does require a special situation, a very specific situation of a large protest that's mishandled by the local police. But unfortunately, it's not unique, and it's not, seemingly it's less and less special. It is specific, but less and less special.
Yeah. And, looking forward and looking ahead to the future, what work is still left to be done when we talk about protecting the rights of protesters?
I mean, the work is change, right? The work is that the settlements themselves, throwing money at a problem doesn't fix it. In the city of New York, I'm told by a New York Civil Liberties Union report that the NYPD's budget is approximately costing the city taxpayer $29 million a day, every day.
Wow.
And so if that's how much the city is paying for the New York City Police Department every day, is $13 million really going to affect it when it doesn't come from the NYPD? It's really not. The only thing that's going to change is when you have leaders who become strong enough to stand up to the NYPD and stand up to their leaders and say, you must change. And right now, our mayor isn't doing that, right? The current mayor, Mayor Adams, is somebody who used to be part of the NYPD. And when he was part of it, he started an organization called 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement. And that was not one that was accepted by the higher-ups in the NYPD at the time. But now that he's the mayor, he's now very close with the NYPD. He's handpicking the leaders, and he's supporting the ones even when they're suffering discipline, when they're caught doing something wrong, when they're caught in misconduct, they have the support of the mayor. And so this is a problem, and I don't know if we're really going to see the change we want, the change we need under this administration.